Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for The Best Lies by Sarah Liu. This was recommended to me by Bookish L, who I will link down below. This is a young adult contemporary novel about a girl whose boyfriend has just been killed by her best friend. The book follows the present storyline where she's talking to the police and trying to wrap her head around what has happened, and the past events leading up to the shooting. I gave this book 4 stars. I will say that for a lot of this book, I was on the fence between 3 and 4 stars. I wasn't sure if it was quite good enough for me to give it the full 4, but at the end of the day, I did really enjoy this. I had a really fun time while reading it, and it was a super entertaining read. This does have kind of a thriller type premise, but I think when it comes to writing style and storytelling, it's much more on the contemporary side of things. It doesn't feel like a thriller. It sounds like a thriller, but it doesn't read like one. While it does have thriller and mystery elements, at the end of the day, I do think it is a dark contemporary. I think for me, the storytelling structure was a little bit tired. It follows 2 timelines, the past events that lead up to the shooting death of Remy's boyfriend, and the present, which is Remy talking to the police, being interrogated, and trying to put together what happened because she's repressed the traumatic event. I have read a lot of thrillers, and I do see that kind of storyline a lot where they're in the present and the main character doesn't really remember exactly what happened, and then you're in the past seeing the events that lead up to that main event. And I see it a lot, and I don't think this book did anything new or different with that. I think it was just kind of the same generic thing I've seen a lot. The reason it didn't bother me more than it did is because this is more of a contemporary. It's not about, the plot twists and the thrills. It's kind of about the characters and their growth as people. And I think because of that, while it was a little tired, it was a little overdone, it wasn't really about that as much as it would have been in a thriller. It did bother me, it was something I noticed, but it didn't affect my enjoyment too much. And in addition to that, it was also very predictable. I think from the beginning, you can tell exactly where this book is going and exactly what's going to happen in the end, partially because of the tired storytelling structure, but again, because it's more of a contemporary, I didn't mind how predictable it was. I didn't mind that we could see where it was going because the book was more about the journey getting there, and I did really enjoy that journey. I had very mixed feelings about Lu's writing style. For the most part, it didn't particularly work for me. A lot of it felt like it was overwritten, like she was trying too hard, and that's kind of one of the weird things about books is that it's so much effort to write. But as a reader, you don't want to see any of that effort. You want it to come across as so easy and so natural that it must have just flowed completely from the author unbroken. And in this, it's like I could see the effort she was putting in. I could see how much work it took to craft the lines that she was writing because it was almost too beautiful at points where she was working really hard to make it sound the most beautiful, and all I could see was just how hard she was working. But because it didn't work for me most of the time, that does mean that in some instances it worked really well. There were some lines that were so incredibly beautiful, and there were a couple of those right towards the end, and I think that was what pushed this book into a 4-star for me. I wanted to read my favorite just because I thought it was incredibly lovely. It is kind of further along in the book, but it doesn't give away any spoilers, I don't think. It's on page 324. I'm not a phoenix rising from its ashes. Fire does not cleanse, only burn. Death isn't rebirth. Jack is never coming back. It's really simple, but it just feels so poetic and so lovely, and I think that line in particular really stuck with me through this book. So I didn't like her writing style overall, but sometimes it did work, and I think when it worked really well. It just wasn't kind of enough for me. But at the same time, it was enough to push this book into 4 stars. I also think, along with the writing style, the dialogue didn't work for me, and unlike the writing style, there was never a point where I was like, okay, this dialogue does work, it works in these instances. It just kind of never worked for me. I wasn't a fan of the dialogue. I think it was too perfect. I could see her writing this and rewriting it and revising it so that it could be the best that it could be, but because of that, it came across as too perfect. It came across as very planned and very calculated and not natural. Dialogue, especially when people are upset or emotional or angry or arguing, is very, very messy. And in this book, it was never messy. It was very, very perfect, very neat. And it didn't come across as the way people really speak. It was all too perfectly constructed, and because of that, it felt fake to me. The last negative thought I have before I talk about what I did like about this book and why it got 4 stars is the character of Jack. He is Remy's boyfriend. He is killed at the beginning of the book. That's not a spoiler. that is the catalyst for the events of this book. Jack is shot by Remy's best friend. Jack seemed like a nice guy, and that was kind of a problem for me. Not that he was a nice guy, but that pretty much the only thing I could say about his character is that he seemed like a nice guy. And he's pretty much the third most important person in this book. After Remy and after her best friend, there's Jack, and he's the catalyst for almost everything that happens in this book. And yet, all I can say about him is that he seemed like a nice guy. And I really wish there'd been more character development there. I wish we got to know him more. Because I could tell you, like, a number of facts about his life, but I couldn't tell you anything, like, about him as a person. And I think that was a failing in the story for me. I wanted to know him better. I wanted him to have a more present role in the story, and instead he was just a nice guy who existed only to be the catalyst. But all that being said, I enjoyed this book quite a bit. It had its flaws, but I picked this up because I wanted something entertaining. I wanted something that was going to suck me in and not let go. I wanted something that I was just going to get entirely invested in and just have a good time with. And that's exactly what this book was. That's what it did for me. I was invested. I cared about Remy. I cared about her relationship with Elise. I cared why Jack died and what had happened. And I loved reading the friendship between Remy and Elise. I think the fact that this book was about a toxic friendship was really fascinating, and it was really well done. There were points where it got a little bit too preachy and a little heavy-handed with the message it was trying to send, but I don't know, that didn't bother me too much because I was just like invested. I liked these people, or, I liked reading about these people even if I didn't specifically like them. I really enjoy reading about unhealthy relationships, and it was good to get to read about an unhealthy friendship in YA, because normally it is about romantic relationships. And while there is a romantic relationship in this book, it's focused on the friendship. The friendship is what's important. Remy and Elise's relationship is what's important. Remy and Jack does come up, but it's about Elise, and I really enjoyed that. At the end of the day, this was a book I was invested in. It took me like 6 days to read, but that's because I read the first 100 pages in one sitting, and then I kept putting it off because I knew I was going to want to binge the rest of the book all at once. Once I eventually did, I was so happy to, and it was just a book that made me happy to read. I thoroughly enjoyed this from start to finish, and I would recommend it. I don't think I would give this a strong recommendation, like I'm not pushing people to go pick this up, but I do think that if it's the kind of book that sounds interesting to you, it was worth a read. I really enjoyed it, and I am glad that I picked it up and that Elle recommended it. Let me know down below if you read The Best Lies and what you thought of it if you have. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.